Hi, Eleni. Uh, Thank you for tuning in. Um, Today's a Saturday, and wish you happy Saturday as well. And if you just tune in, could you share so we have many people to join us for this wonderful day? And just share so we have many people to join us. And thank you again. How incredible. Thank you, Princess, to joining in. Thanks, Shay Kingston. Did I pronounce your name right? Anyway, if you just join in, could you share so we have many people to join us? And it's a wonderful day. And my name is Funton Daniel. I will be speaking here from the great state of Texas about the issues affecting the southern Cameroon. And if you just tune in, just share so that we get more people to join in. And thank you again for taking off your time and morning. I know it's about 11 a.m. here in the great state of Texas. And if you just tuning in, just share. We have many people joining us. And that we're gonna be having a very wonderful, great conversation. And if you just tune in, just share. We have many people, and I have inquired. Thank you for taking the opportunity to you wonderful people. It's very fantastic. And if you just joining me, just share so that we have many people joining us. It's very important that we have more issues to discuss today. And thank you again. And you're gonna have a wonderful day. Uh, and another thing, I want to make my listeners, my viewers, that you can also get me live on YouTube. You can also get me live on Twitter, and you can also get me live on Facebook. So as I'm speaking, I will be speaking live on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. So. So it is important that either or you will be getting me live, and it is important that we share so that many people should join us this morning. And once again, my name is Funton Daniel. I will be speaking here from the great state of Texas. And if you happen to be in Ground Zero, when I talk of Ground Zero, you need to remember I'm talking specifically to the Southern Cameroon territory, now called Federal Republic of Ambazonian. If you are in La Republique, and just indicate that you are in La Republique. If you are somewhere in Africa, if you're in Nigeria, you're in South Africa, you are in Ghana, and you are in any other part of Africa, just indicate where you are. And I want to thank you for taking the opportunity to join me live this morning. And if you are in Europe, that's great. I know my people in Europe, they're still at work, and probably if they have the opportunity. So that is why I just share so that they can join us live as well. They haven't gone to bed, they're still at work. Um, and if you are in Europe, thank you again for tuning in. And once more, my name is Photon Daniel. I'm speaking here from the great state of Texas. Um, if you are in the United States, just indicate where you are. Usually I go through and see who have had the opportunity to. who has had the opportunity, and I usually go through and see all where my audience are. And thank you again. Just share so we have many people to join us. My name is Futon Daniel. I will be speaking here from the great state of Texas. And thanks, Helen, for joining in. And just share so we have many people to join us. Uh, Today, one important things that I want to be talking about is the United Nations deviation from its original objectives. One thing that I will be talking about is how United Nations deviated from its original objectives and has led to the genocide that is occurred not only to the southern Cameroon territory, the Anglophone speaking territory, but the other part of the world that has experienced the same failed United Nations office here in the United States. And so that is the things that I will be talking about. And if you have a question, and just indicate, and we will be talking alongside with your questions. And just type it a little below, and I will also go through some of those questions. But the important thing that I will be talking about is how United Nations deviated from its original objectives. And that has led to the genocide, and not only to the Anglophone speaking territory, but to the rest of other part of the world. It's because of the leadership that has failed. The leadership of the United Nations is a scam that has led to this genocide. And I want to speak specifically because it is in a country where democracy prevailed, human dignity are respected, the rule of law prevailed. But yet, and I'm going to be talking about these differences, what happened when the United Nations in the 60s and the current United Nations now. So if you just join in, just share so that we have many people tune in so that we can start this important deliberation. And once again, thank you for tuning in. My name is Funton Daniel, and I want to appreciate you for taking your time from your normal activities to be able to listen. And thank you again. And if you just joining me, just indicate where you are. If you are in ground zero, thank you for taking the opportunity. And if you are in La Republique, thank you for taking that opportunity. If you are in Europe, thank you again for taking that opportunity. If you are in United States, thank you again, and share so that many people should join us. And once more again, my name is Funton Daniel, and I will be speaking here from the great state of Texas. And if you just didn't, I have Afu, thank you, and I have Helen, thank you. That just tuned in from Facebook, and just briefly indicate where you are, and thank you again. And I know those on my Twitter account, I haven't seen any. Some are making note, and I have at least some on the YouTube. Thank you for tuning in, and my Facebook, and great having you guys on the. And thank you again. I know Before I proceed, and thank you, Justin. Thank you, Waters, and for tuning in. Just share. We have more people joining us, and thank you again. Before I proceed again, I want to thank the United States government. I want to thank the United States Department of Defense. I want to thank the United States State Department. I want to thank the U.S. The entire President's cabinet, Donald Trump's cabinet. I want to thank U.S. Permanent Representative to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, and they are doing a wonderful job. I want to thank Tilson, the U.S. Secretary of State. And I want to thank them for this important issues that affect it. It's not only the Southern Cameroon, but other countries that are going through similar failure of the United Nations that inactivities, United Nations inactions. And one thing you will agree with me that the United Nations is led by Antonio Guterres. And United Nations is being led by Antonio Guterres, and he has been behind the United Nations is being led by Antonio Guterres. He is the head of the United Nations. That is the failed system that is physically here in the United States that had led to this current genocide in the Southern Cameroon territory, now called the Federal Republic of Ambazonian. And I want to talk about the Southern Cameroon or the Federal Republic Ambazonian Interim Cabinet. I know the Secretary for Communications gave a brief report about what is happening, and that some of the members of the cabinet are still in Nigeria and that they have not been extradited to La Republique. And La Republique is making a mistake. La Republique is making a mistake. La Republique hasn't learned. They hasn't learned from what happened to Libya. They hasn't learned from what happened to Gaddafi. They haven't learned from what happened to Iraqian, and they haven't learned, and they still believe that it's a dead horse that they're still riding. But I just want to make it clear to La Republique that it's time you acknowledge, it's time you pull out of the Federal Republic of Ambazonian territory. It's time you do so. I know many of you are in the 70s. You don't care whether you are worth anything. You don't care whether you die. And that is why, since you're on your way to die, but I have let you, La Republique, know that I know they are 70 years and above, and they already enjoy the benefit, and they don't care if they die. But however, remember, you have a descendant of your family that are living, and that the people of Southern Cameroon can only indicate what they will stand for. And that if you has chosen to vacate the Southern Cameroon territory, we can work as a neighbor, as a good neighbors. But if you persist because you have the money to bribe certain member of the United Nations cabinet, certain members of the United Nations, and now the United Nations has become the most corrupted system since the beginning of that body. This is the worst, and the United Nations body has become the worst corrupted system. And I can imagine that this corrupted system of body is physically here in the United States. When I look at the judicial system, when I look at the government of the United States, when I look at the government, and I think it's the government of the people, the government that stands against nepotism, a government that stands against brutality, a government that kicks against any form of brutality. And that has been the format that has led the United States to become the leading power in the hemisphere. But when the United States is housing another body that has deviated from the fundamental principles of human dignity and respect of individuals' rights, and is being headed by someone that is incapable. The fact that he has been in that organization for 30 years doesn't give him a mandate as a sound leadership. The fact that he is a prime minister and happened to be a prime minister from Europe doesn't give him a leadership. We have to look at in terms of leadership quality. What possesses him as a head of organizations? A leadership of a head of organization is an organization that respects human dignity, respects human value, and rule according to the dignity of the United Nations. But however, the United Nations that we have here, that is led by Antonio Guterres, is a mess. He hasn't shown his credentials that he is capable to lead such organizations. And that is why I refer to when Brutus Ghali of Egypt, when he was head of these organizations, Bill Clinton was the president of the United States. He stated categorically that Brutus Ghali can never lead United Nations, given his philosophical background and his ability to lead that organization. And that is why Bill Clinton stood firmly that I will not allow the United Nations to become rock in mud like what we have now. The current Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, is absolutely disgusting ever person to lead such an organization. The role and the value of the United Nations is to protect humans, irrespective of their objectives. And Southern Cameroon, whom I always speak specifically, and it's because it matters to me, and because the people are my brothers, and the people are my sisters, and the elsewhere in the world, they are facing these similar problems because of a failure of the United Nations office here, led by Antonio Guterres. You will agree with me that Antonio Guterres, the first time in century that he personally prevents press to have access. Freedom of a press is not negotiable. Freedom of press is not negotiable. Freedom of press is what stands as an arbitrary against chronic system of government. And that is why freedom is to check and balance, to help guide any democratic society to function to its full capacity. But Antonio Guterres, who is presently the United Nations Secretary General, has prevented all these access and even blocked those press to even have access to him in particular. And yet we think we are in an advanced society, advanced world. But we don't. We have someone that is leading this important organization of the world, is manipulating, prevent access to information because he is individually handed the United Nations like his personal property rather than the goal and the objective to which the United Nations stood for. if United Nations was living to up its obligations, if United Nations was living to up to its obligations, then the minimal crisis around the world would have diminished. But because United Nations is being led by a certain individual that has no capacity to lead such an organization, and I am calling on the United States to step forward and ask this guy to leave the United Nations so that we have someone that is capable to lead the organization. Because as human crises start emancipating, start erupting in the rest of the world, it become a I'm having difficulty to give exactly what this structure in New York is doing. Antonio Guterres is not capable to lead the United Nations organization. We need a fresh start. We need a new person to stand in the United Nations head office. Because when United Nations, the purpose of the United Nations was founded for the rule of law, the respect of human dignity. Human right is the cornerstone of the United Nations. And respect other aspiring nations that choose their path to their destiny. And if this is true, Southern Cameroon, which I am speaking about, and other nations that have encountered similar problems because of a failure of the United Nations to live up to its obligations. When United Nations traveled to Cameroon, La Republique, when United Nations Secretary General traveled to Central African Republic, and later on he traveled to Cameroon, his vision, which he analyzed that the people of the Southern Cameroon were simply a terrorist. When someone with such capacity leading an organization described as human that live in their territorial integrity, live in their home, in their place of origin, and someone that has no legal authority over the people of Southern Cameroon, and he described them as a terrorist, I am kind of concerned whether he is mentally capable to lead such an important organization like the United Nations. There is a contrast difference between the current Secretary General and the Secretary General of the 1960s when the Southern Cameroon got their independence. United Nations in the 50s and 60s, they were more proactive, they were more engaged, they were more to visualize the problems that many nations within that era was having. And so they were more proactive, and that is why the Article 76B of the United Nations mandate those colonial territories that were under the Allied forces to prepare them for immediate independence. That was a decision made by the United Nations office during the 50s and the 60s. And that article was highly respected. And United Nations officials ensured that there was a follow-up to make sure that those Article 76B of the United Nations regulations and the granting of their immediate independence is subsequently. There was a follow-up delegations within the United Nations to ensure that those policies were accurately implemented. As I'm speaking here right now, the Southern Cameroon territory by default is a sovereign nation that their independence was granted in 1961. And if their independence was granted, and they had the notion that at the time the population of that country wasn't ready to have a sovereignty, but they give them a partial independence. And you will agree with me now that if the people has risen now and said they are capable to manage, it is an obligation of the United Nations office to indicate that the people of the Southern Cameroon, even if we are in 1961, that we gave them a partial independence, they must be ready by now within the past 56 years. As someone with sound judgment and will make such a good assessment and analysis and draw to a conclusion that the Southern Cameroon at this moment have deserved a sovereignty. But because the United Nations is a corrupt system, it's the most corrupted system, it's when the current Secretary General called Antonio Guterres, when he traveled to the Southern Cameroon, when he traveled to La République or the Republic of Cameroon, he did not, first of all, invite the leaders of the Southern Cameroon to talk with them physically like the United Nations of the 50s and the 60s did. He hasn't. But he gives his wrong judgment. You can only give a conclusion about a certain individual, group, or a society after you have had your own personal assessment by discussing with those individuals and the people concerned. He hasn't used that initiative, but he draws a conclusion to his poor judgment and his poor reasoning and his poor assessment. If someone comes to me and I happen to be and I meet a patient and I talk to the patient, I have to first of all assess the patient. I have to first of all talk to the patient. And from the message, from the assessment, from the problem I identify from the patient, I can be able to draw a conclusion from my assessment that this person is suffering from this kind of problem and that I should be able to present that case for that proper treatment of that particular individual. United Nations office physically here in the United States hasn't made such an assessment, but he draws a conclusion without meeting those people concerned. It is very, very ironical. It is very, very ironical that when the United Nations office hasn't had opportunity to talk to those concerned, to talk to the individuals, they say they are preparing, they are working on it. How long does they have to work on it to be able to bring to the final conclusion? When we have a representative in the sub-Central African region called Francois Lefort, is the United Nations appointed individual to the Central African region called Francois Lefort. Francois Lefort has mentally challenged because he cannot make good assessment or good judgment. He cannot even give himself access to the media to actually interview him, get his own analysis. He hasn't provided that opportunity. He is so scared of the media, just as his boss it is, Antonio Guterres. They are so scared of the media. They have invited them to talk about the current crisis, but they are not making themselves available because the taxes of the people of the United States are using to pay function the United Nations. And yet the duty they're supposed to serve to prevent conflict in the rest of the world, they are rather the conflict promoter because they use their position as a bribery scheme against the freedom of the people. When the Southern Cameroon, when the people of the Southern Cameroon in the 50s, in the 60s, when the people of Southern Cameroon initially had their first election that was conducted under the British administrator, the United Nations presented that case. The British administrator presented a case to the United Nations. And United Nations act upon immediately, swiftly. And there was a representative of the United Nations that headed to the Southern Cameroon and was led by a United States delegation to the Southern Cameroon to evaluate the readiness of the people of Southern Cameroon as a sovereign nation and their political maturity. Yet, United Nations has not dispatched any single member of its delegation to the Southern Cameroon territory as I'm speaking. We have at least 50,000 people that have been currently residing in Nigeria. The entire cabinet of the people of Southern Cameroon has been captured and undergoing military scrutiny. And yet the people hasn't got a member of the United Nations stand firmly, either conduct a new fresh meeting to discuss the crisis. United Nations in the 50s were able to organize a meeting to discuss the crisis, but the current United Nations Secretary General hasn't. When we talk about maturity, democracy, or a good sound of government, Southern Cameroon territory exercise those values that should have been respected by the current United Nations. They haven't. La Republique hasn't exercised any meaningful judgment or organized a meaningful election where power can be transferred from one elected individual to another elected individual. La Republique has not exercised such a democratic process. Why does La Republique sound a more ready government than the Anglo-Saxon that has organized a meaningful election and transfer of power from one elected individual to another elected individual? Because France is the architect of the deciding member of the United Nations that has vehemently destroyed the African continent of the Sub-Sahara. France is the architect of the manipulator, prevent any meaningful dialogue to prevail in the Sub-Saharan African continent, to which France is part of the dividing force. And Southern Cameroon will not succumb to such initiative. It is very, very disgusting. It is very, very disgusting that we have United Nations Secretary General physically here in the United States become the most corrupted system. It is the duty of the United Nations. When the Southern Cameroon developed this, they have written several documents tabled at the United Nations. It is the duty of the United Nations to invite those concerned and have an in-dialogue discussion with them and be able to present those dialogue to the common United Nations body about the position of the Southern Cameroon, whether they choose to live with La Republique or they choose as their separate independent. In the beginning, at first, there is no marriage relationship between La Republique and Southern Cameroon. It's a simple understanding between the Southern Cameroon and La Republique du Cameroon. There is no legal document binding. If we agree that the United Nations plenary session that was held on the 21st of April 1961 recognized the Southern Cameroon as a sovereign nation, if they recognize why choosing to live with La Republique as a neighbor, then La Republique has no legal authority over the Southern Cameroon. During the voting of the 1964 Southern Cameroon, During the voting of 1961, Southern Cameroon was recognized as a sovereign entity. And if Southern Cameroon was recognized as a sovereign entity, it is a duty when the people of that very region stood by and said, I have a concern because we as a sovereign nation has chosen to live with La Republique, but they have deviated from the original objectives that has brought us together, and that they have wholeheartedly failed in those objectives. And however, we have chosen to evaluate, and the people have demonstrated that La Republique is incapable because La Republique is a bad faith. And the citizens in the Southern Cameroon has demonstrated there has not been any single school operating in the Southern Cameroon given the all instruction given by the acting and the interim government. And yet, the people of Southern Cameroon, they have at least 50 to 60,000 people languishing in Nigeria. They are not able to return home because of La Republique invaders, and because La Republique has bribed the current Secretary General in the United Nations that is physically here in the United States. You can imagine that United Nations has been bribed by La Republique, the current brutal dictatorship of La Republique. Paul Biya has bribed the current Secretary General here in New York, and he can't even open his mouth during a general plenary session of the General Assembly of the United Nations to discuss the current crisis of the Southern Cameroon. As a leader of the United Nations, the purpose of the United Nations was to preserve human dignity, respect the rule of law. That was the purpose of the United Nations, and that's the purpose it was formed. But the leadership has deviated from this original goal and objective of the United Nations to now a more of a scam. It's more of a scam rather than the goal it was. And that is why you find so much humanitarian crisis in and around the world that United Nations has categorically failed to intervene. But instead of standing with the people, United Nations stand with the aggressor, stand with the perpetrator. That is the goal of the United Nations, and that is why the common United Nations Secretary General traveled to the Southern Cameroon, traveled to La Republique, and never care or pay attention that I have a duty to travel to the Southern Cameroon where the crisis is. He has not even responded. United Nations has not responded, either sending United Nations representative or inspector to the Southern Cameroon where the crisis is currently happening. There have been at least, if not, I have pictures and you can watch on my video. You can imagine that La Republique army are using knives to slaughter a man with a wife and children in front of the wife and children. A man was taken from the wife and children and he was slaughtered by the military of La Republique. And I have the evidence of the pictures on my Facebook. And right now that I'm speaking, the wife has been arrested by La Republique. The wife has been arrested despite the horrific torture and slaughtering of a human being by the evil force of La Republique. United Nations hasn't think that it is their duty to come to stop the current crisis of the genocide. The Southern Cameroon are well educated. The Southern Cameroon have graduated to the highest level of university. The Southern Cameroon has intellectual capacity. There must be well educated people in the southern sub-Saharan Africa. Southern Cameroon. So therefore, they have enough education to define their destiny. They don't need to be managed by a certain individual or a country. Southern Cameroon are well educated. They have been all the highest universities that here in the United States and elsewhere in the world. Their mental capacity of learning is higher than any other part of Africa. They are well super intelligent, and yet they can't be able to decide their destiny. They must be managed by the French authority, because French has a voting permanent, is a veto member of the United Nations that has absolutely failed in its entire capacity. How can La République murdering someone by his soldier, slaughtering like an animal, and the video, and they're able to videotape that individual, and I have the video here on my Facebook, and yet we have the United Nations office physically here in the United States, and they remain silent, and we are using our tax money to fund the United Nations office physically here in the United States. And he paid no action, no attention, and nobody is scared to report about it, because the major media are more concerned on their own priorities. But that is why I am presenting this case to the fellow Americans. I am presenting this case because no one pay attention. Southern Cameroon is not a secessionist. Southern Cameroon is a nation on its own. Southern Cameroon was voted by the United Nations in the 1st of April 1961. That vote is physically here. There are 64 nations that voted for the sovereignty of Southern Cameroon, and they become an independent. And if they have a 1 year difference between La République and the Southern Cameroon, La République got their independence in 1960, Southern Cameroon in 1961. I am sure if the Southern Cameroon hasn't matured enough, up to 56 years, they should be able to mature to define their destiny, to be able to manage their territory without any. You will agree with me, the Rwanda crisis, when the nation failed to prevent a solution to the Rwanda crisis. But today, you will agree with me that Rwanda is the most developed place now in Africa within this short space of time, because United Nations, the corrupted system, physically in New York, has not done its job. He's going, the United Nations office here in the United States is more concerned with bribery. It's more concerned with corruption. He stands with the United Nations stood with the corrupted officials against the benefactors. Against the benefactors. You will watch on my Facebook, if you scroll down, you will see mothers and children. They are living in the forest. They are walking in the forest because the evil brutality of La République military wing. And yet, it doesn't occur to the United Nations to stand and say, oh, you guys need to stay home. But he paid no attention, because it is a minority speaking. It is people that has no value. But I am here to tell the United Nations, I will stand and speak on my behalf of my people. I will stand until the voice of the White House will listen. I will stand and speak until the U.S. Department of Defense will listen. I will stand to speak until the State Department will listen. I will speak to the U.S. Treasury Department will listen. I will speak to all the entire United States citizens will listen, and that they will come to rescue the people that are going under the military evil of the regime. Southern Cameroon is more of a democratic country that exercises those duties, and it is the official duty of the United Nations to recognize the nations that are able to exercise those human dignity. La République has not organized any meaningful elections. La République has not had any democratic change of government. You have one brutal dictatorship from 25 years as a brutal dictator to another President Paul Biya for 35 years of brutal dictatorship. Southern Cameroon has exercised that a leadership accountability. When the Queen of England at the 1950s and the 60s, when the Queen of England was providing subventions to the colonies' territory. Southern Cameroon were never given a subvention. Why? Because they were prosperous, they were more accountable, they were more providing economic structure that were more feasible to the Queen of England. And that is why they value the Southern Cameroon territory integrity. La Republic hasn't demonstrated since the colonial era of the French dictatorship. France has known when the Southern Cameroon was busy organizing free and fair elections and the transfer of power from one elected official to the next, La Republic was busy under military occupation of France. France was busy murdering the citizens of La Republic. Ahidjo wasn't a legitimate president of La Republic. It was if free and fair election was organized by the French authority, La Republic would not have had Ahidjo as its president. They would have had a more better person. But because Ahidjo was a stewardship of France, that is why he became the president of La Republic. Paul Biya, another descendant of a stewardship of France, was never supposed to be. But because France manipulated and said he was in a major chaotic health situation and that Ahidjo need to relinquish power, and that you have this another brutal dictatorship, Paul Biya, who is currently in power. And that is why the Secretary General of the United Nations, instead of going there and tell exactly what it is, he went and he was more concerned of his package, of his bribery package, rather than the freedom of the people that are demonstrating. That is why when I'm speaking here, United Nations has not dispatched even a single member of delegation to the Southern Cameroon territory. The British has dispatched, the former colonial master has dispatched 2 consecutive members of the Great Britain. First, the Commonwealth Secretary General, and second, the African Affairs Minister to the Southern Cameroon territory. And yet, United Nations is still to send a delegation to investigate the crisis in the Southern Cameroon. How can Antonio Guterres dispatch a delegation to Southern Cameroon when he already received a bribery from the brutal dictatorship of Paul Biya in Cameroon? He can. Because he's going against his bribing that has been given to him. And that is why the people are suffering under the current crisis of the United Nations. I am speaking this. I want the United States government, don't sleep. United Nations, get up and stand for human dignity. United States government, stand up for human dignity. United States government, stand up for human dignity. If the current ambassador of the United States is residing in La Republic and doesn't give good accountability of what is happening in Southern Cameroon, we have a ready available ambassador here in the United States that are capable to define the value of the United States. If the current ambassador of the United States in La Republic is incapable to give accurate information exactly what is happening in Southern Cameroon, then we have a ready available ambassador that are capable to report. United States is not afraid to tell the truth. And United States has always stood for the truth of human dignity. And I hope United States government will use that value again. The people of Southern Cameroon, the government that they want to implement, the structure of government is not different from the United States, because the citizens of that place are here in the United States. They have valued the government of the United States and they appreciate the beauty of the United States government. And I am asking the United States government, if you are watching, call anybody of the Congress. If you are watching, call the US White House. If you are watching, call, because we cannot tolerate this continued murdering of people of Southern Cameroon. We can't tolerate it. I can imagine. I am not making this up. Go to my Facebook and look at the mass exodus of human beings leaving their home. Either some have been burnt, Either some have difficulty to live because they have been brutalized. And that is why I am speaking here for all the members of the United States government. Because I trust the government. I believe in this government. I believe that they can do something. And they can do it now. Right now that I'm speaking, the people of Bakundu are now going through excruciating military occupation. The people of Bakundu are now going through military excruciating difficulty. As I'm speaking now, the Bakassi Peninsula, they are going through terrorists of the brutal evil force of La Republique. The people of the Bakassi Peninsula, the people of Ngolo, the people of Melima, the people of the Carrefour Dombe. The one burning and unfortunate thing is that while the military wing of the La Republique are not just going there to destabilize the dignity of the people of the Southern Cameroon, they're distorting them, they're murdering them, they distort their money, they disrupt them. Those people, those business owners, what La Republique does that is not often presented to the rest of the world. They will arrest the business guy and ask him to pay 10 million, which is equivalent to 5,000 US dollars. And imagine a third world country where people have that amount of money to be able to manage, and when the military wing are distorting this money and for their own personal enrichment rather than the interest of the duty in which they were assigned, then I have a concern that if the United States government does not act now, the crisis will escalate to another level, and will continue to escalate to another level, and will continue to escalate to another level until the people become unbearable. So I am asking United Nations, I am asking United States, because United Nations has failed in total obligations. United Nations has failed in its total obligation. United Nations is led by the most corrupted officials, and it's led by Antonio Guterres. Is the most worst corrupted individual. I know that as I'm speaking, I am speaking to people that understood human respect of human dignity. When the people that love government, when people that love democracy, they love freedom, and United Nations Charter recognize that people have the right to their self-determination. They have the right to freedom. Southern Cameroon does not seeking for self-determination because they already got their self-determination. But they are being persuaded by the United Nations and the French because it is an exploratory area that is more concerned to France because he holds the signature of the United Nations called the veto power. That is why the people of Southern Cameroon are going through this crisis. Because France holds a veto power, the signature that can say no and they will accept. But I have a good news that we have Britain. If Britain is sleeping, I am knocking their door to get up from the bed, and that the people of Southern Cameroon are not free. You have a duty to do so. You have a duty to veto that power because you stand. If France is veto power for the people of La Republique, then you have to have a veto power for the people of Southern Cameroon because we share this common value, we share this common identity because we have it, and we abide by the rules that Britain inflicted on us, and we respect that rule and we share it. And unfortunately, we happen to the majority of the rest of the world that practice the common democracy as a way of life. When France goes to the poll to elect their individual, Africa doesn't come and tell them who they should be elected. They decide that destiny. And so Africa should be able to decide who they can be able to elect to govern them. But France is the sole architect that prevent every form of democracy to prevail in the Southern Cameroon territory, all the French territory. And so Southern Cameroon will not be partnership with the French Republic. And so therefore, I am calling the Great Britain. If you are sleeping, I am waking you up that you got a duty to accomplish before you go to sleep. The people of Canada has voted twice. French is the minority in Canada. The French is the minority in Canada. But they have voted twice for a total independence. Southern Cameroon does not need to vote for a total independence because they already got their independence. Canada has voted twice to succeed. Why? Because they were part of the document that granted them as sovereign nations. But yet, the French minority in Canada doesn't see themselves to be part of Canada. And they have voted twice and could not win their sovereignty. Southern Cameroon is a sovereign nation. They don't need to secede because they already have their independence. They just leave La Republique to get out of their territory and allow the people to decide their destiny. When the European Union was formed, the goal of the European Union was to counteract the United States dollar system. That was their main goal. Although the truth has never been spoken. The purpose of the European Union was to counteract the United States. But unfortunately, there is one great difference that the Europeans did not understand. The United States has a one common language, which is the English. The United States has a federal system of government. And those federal system of government is made up of the United States, made up of governors. And the governor has a federal system of government. The system of the United States is totally different from Europe. While Europe is made up of heterogeneous nations that are forming a nation, and each one is autonomous, and each one is an independent nation, and they want to control the United States. United States structure is different, and so therefore Europeans cannot compete with the United States. But when Great Britain, a former member that voted to join the European Union, in the course of viewing the relationship with the European Union, the Great Britain chose to vote out of the European Union. There was no invasion of Britain. There was no military occupation sent to Britain. It was a friendly gentleman relationship that the people of Britain had spoken. But yet, the Southern Cameroon territory, they are not free. They have to be succumb to all type of the brutal military force. The European Union did not send a military wing to invade the people of Great Britain. Why they choose to leave the European Union? They recognize them that they have the duty and privilege to decide their destiny. And that is what the Great Britain did. And they choose to leave the European Union. Why can't the people of Southern Cameroon leave La Republique? Why there should be a military occupation of La Republique and yet the rest of the world remains silent? It's happening within the eyes of all of us. Others has to go through military occupation, whereas others going through gentleman understanding. Because we have to remain silent and be direct like sheep. Wherever you choose to be going, and you have to go. And because we have every arsenal of military guns to be able to persuade them. I think it is an era that Africa need to emancipate. Africa need to start producing their own arsenal because they will use to defend their own territory. Because if you depend that you have to be sheep, and those various area levels shall be prevent you. Because if Britain have their own arsenal, European Union cannot attempt to tamper with the Britain. And so because they will meet us now with us now, they remain silent. But because Southern Cameroon is the people of yes, sir, the people that say, okay, we agree, we thank you, we honor you, we respect you, yes, sir. And that is why they're going through this excruciating, where you have 40,000 people languishing in the forest. If a single people leave the European Union and languishing in the forest, the whole world will be aware of it. But now the Southern Cameroon, at least 50,000 people are living in an infested mosquito net. No one has talked about it. Everyone remains silent. It is in Africa continent. And we have a certain individuals that are among us and they remain silent. Even though they have had the PhD, they have all type of degree, and they have it. When you go to their home, you see they line them on their home. They ask you, what did you graduate? I graduated from the Harvard University. I graduated from the following university. I graduated from... And when you ask them, what have you learned? And what have you done? Absolutely, their paycheck. That's all they have learned. And yet, you have 40,000 people, and those with those PhD, they can't even write a single letter. Because if all of us physically here in the United States of Southern Cameroon write to the congressman, and that place will be liberated within a think of a second. But yet we fold them and put it in our pocket and remain silent because we are the good guys. I have a good news for you. You are playing for time. The people must be free and the people shall overcome it. I want to take a moment to thank all of you that are watching. I hope you have taken some messages. I hope you have gotten some information. I hope you understand that you have a duty to free your people. They must not be related to you in blood, but because we are from the same locality and we are physically here in the United States, we are the ambassador of those people, of the people of Southern Cameroon, and we are here and we are their eyes. We need to tell the world that there is a problem going on. And if we remain silent because we want to show that we are the good guys, you may be on the wrong side of the camel and you will be ridden to the sea and where you shall be discarded. We must stand together and we must stand and speak the truth. If you don't have a word to speak, then you can say something. You can either support by attending all the meetings, you can do anything, because if we are the eyes of the people of the Southern Cameroon and we are physically here in the United States and we find that the people are suffering because of invading La Republique, then we need to stand together as a one entity and get La Republique out of the Southern Cameroon. I know we have the black legs, just as we have the black legs in the 60s. And they did not listen, they did not pay attention. That is why the Southern Cameroon is still going through this mess with La Republique. But I have a good news to La Republique, that until you vacate, you will vacate either in cups or you vacate in other form. But either or, you shall vacate the Southern Cameroon territory, and the people shall claim their land and that they are free indeed. I want to take a moment to thank the United States government. I want to take a moment to thank the U.S. Department of Defense. I want to take a moment to thank the U.S. Secretary of State. I want to take a moment that as you keep a blindfold on the people of Southern Cameroon, that is how the genocide continues to prevail over there. But if you open your eyes, then you can prevent the genocide that is going on. And I think the people of Southern Cameroon can trust the United States government that they can do something. And they have been writing. And I hope they not only just writing, but they need to translate those writings into action. Because if you continue to write and no action is taking place, then the writing becomes useless. And that is why I'm asking the United States government that they need to translate the writing into full gear action. Because that is what the people need. Because the 40,000 people that are languishing in Nigeria are not supposed to. La Republic has no legal authority over the southern Cameroon. And that is why I am asking the United States government to translate the writing into full action. I know United States, the government that I believe, the government that I trust, the government that I believe can do something, and the Congress that I believe can do something, the U.S. Senate that I believe can do something, the U.S. Senate can do something. The brutal dictator cannot survive if the government that I trust, United States government, can do something. Because United Nations is a scam. It's led by a scammer, the Antonio Guterres. And so I am presenting this case to the government that I believe that they have the power to do so, and that they can choose and do it now, and that the writing they have been writing should be translated into physical action. Because if the ambassador of the United States currently residing in Southern La Republic cannot stand up, then we need a new fresh ambassador to the Southern to La Republic, to tell La Republic that the people of the great state of the United States, the people of the United States stand with human freedom and dignity. And that is the government that I appreciate. And that is the government I'm asking them to do it. That the writing should be translated into physical action. Until then, the people shall be murdered. And I want to take a moment to thank you, all of you watching. God bless you.